Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 20 of my Pyanodons playthrough. In this episode, we are going to make refined concrete and gas furnaces in order to reduce the amount of ash that our factory produces. Enjoy! And here it is. It's a pretty straightforward setup. It's just physically large. And this will consume all of our concrete, assuming this runs at full power, which it often doesn't. But we can limit this to one stack now because we're going to want the refined concrete instead. And we might as well just put it over here and give it some spaces so there's room to expand to electric assemblers later if we want to. And I'm actually going to walk this back a little bit just to make it so it's 7.5 iron sticks to make the build a little simpler. For once, we're actually limited based on the number of assemblers and not something weird like inserter speed. Hello. Okay, hopefully this is set up correctly. We're going to need to put some concrete into this system to see it work. So temporarily, we'll put some in here. Okay, let's see if all of this spaghetti works. Even with splitters, things are still kinda nuts, but that's cause no long-handed inserters. So first, all of the fuel, which is coke, gets inserted in. Get rid of all the flashing lights. It might take a little while to seed because we have one inserter doing this. Could put a splitter in there, but the one inserter should be fine. So let's check the iron and the steel, where the steel gets split and put onto the fuel belt here, and the iron goes around to the side. So we'll pipe it in and making a bunch of sticks. When you first built this setup, I was worried we would need a bunch of iron and steel, but now that our factory's expanded a little bit, I think we can spend it on concrete. Not to mention that there's more of the factory that needs to be paved, and this is more efficient with the stone. But anyway, in goes the concrete. And this should mostly max out the belt. The ash is handled in a weird way where these machines will place the ash over here to go around, and then the refined concrete machines will actually just put ash and refined concrete onto this one belt. It's not going to overload the belt, and we have splitters now, so it's fine. So it gets put on both sides, and then when it gets to here, it'll be sorted. But well, most everything is in here, so let's just pipe in the water and see what happens. I imagine this will be an achievement of some sort. It is a slow craft. What? No achievement? Scammed. I was hoping to see a little bit of ash in there. There we go. So we put that there. It starts getting sucked into all the chests, and this is going to be our new factory paving material, so no need to limit the chests, just put everything in there. Any little bits of ash that make it can just be put on this other setup and sent along their way. So because we get twice as much refined concrete for regular concrete, it means that we can just pave the factory and replace our concrete and then put it back into the system here, and that will just keep making more without any input stone. So here we go, refined concrete. Let's find a place with all three types. So boom, putting that down. So as a final comparison of speed, we have snow speed, stone speed, concrete speed, and finally refined concrete speed. It is very fast, like noticeably so, and that's 350% increase. Refined concrete is so fast you might not even need the grappling hook anymore. We'll just slowly start replacing parts of the factory as required. Right now though, we want all that refined concrete so we can make gas furnaces. They are a little expensive for what they are, but compared to most of the things in Pi, it is a very simple recipe. And here's what it looks like. It's just a steel furnace, but it has a pipe connection on the side. So it's been a little while, but how has that caravan depot been doing? No, nothing's really changed, but we have enough in here to at least set up the caravan. And good thing we came here to notice that aromatics is getting very full now, so we'll probably just have to burn that as a fluid. That said, we're almost done with shale oil, and I think it will fit in here without overflowing. And who knows where the best place to start paving is, but let's start with the setup making the refined concrete and go from here. One depot for gravel, one for tin. This one will be both sulfur and soot because both machines are right here. And we need somewhere for the coal dust, probably put it right here at our biggest power plant. That'll make it most likely to get used, so we can put a caravan down. And let's find the other one. And we can actually copy its settings. Oh, it's right there. And then put them into this one. And if we give it some food, it'll stop wandering around. And then we can kind of just change this. So if we right click the outpost, instead of picking up there, we can just come over here, and you actually don't need to zoom in on the map. You can click it from here if you know which square it is. So we go there and say full, and then just start picking places for it to do its rounds. Okay, we'll see if we did all this correctly by telling it to go get food. In he comes, loading up on food, and in this case he picked up the jerky. It doesn't really matter. Technically the brains are better because he gets 2 actions as opposed to 1, but for all practical purposes it's essentially the same thing. Also interesting to note that the brains do not seem to decay inside the food slot. That once they pick them up it essentially lasts forever, but we're only going to be using this for a limited amount of time. That once we have AUG food and then later workers food, we're just going to be feeding them that and not worrying about all of these raw foods. And this tank is very full at 951k, but I believe all of the shale has been processed now, so we can get rid of that tank. But first, let's follow the path of our faithful servant here. So he picks up stuff, but let's just start the process now. No need to wait around. We want to make sure it works. So in he comes and drops off the 2 items here. The soot gets processed, and the sulfur will get processed. And dropping off the titanium, the coal dust. And we might actually want a few inserters on this because this seems like the kind of thing that would run pretty rapidly. And there's the gravel. And there's the tin. And he's going to go back to go again. So we have enough brains and jerky now to where we can basically use them for whatever task. Oops, extra inserter there. That we want to. So we'll just have to play it by ear, but generally speaking, if we have empty belts, it's something that might want to have one. This is the ash byproduct belt, but you're kind of noticing that our factory is transitioning from having all of these empty belts and spaghetti and going everywhere to having a lot of full belts, so you can actually see what they're for, because we are replacing those empty belts with caravans. We'll just look at the factory as we walk by, and if anything makes sense to get a caravan, we'll add one in. But we don't need the tailings pond now, which is going to be 1 zigzaggy pipe we can remove. Of course, we can use the caravans for fluids too. Certainly byproduct pipes are another candidate for them, because it's nice having full pipes of stuff, and empty pipes are hard to read. Like this pipe here, if we didn't know that it was for shale, it would just be an empty pipe and we'd have to follow it around the factory to find out. And there we go. So we're eventually going to want to have some kind of logic for turning shale on and off, but for now it seems like we have plenty of burnable fluids, so we don't need to worry about it. Okay then, now that we can make gas furnaces, we can start looking at our setups and figuring out which ones to upgrade. And I would generally upgrade ones that have already received a processing upgrade, because that will save us processing time in the furnace itself, because this is going to burn more fuel than a stone furnace would, so we kind of care. And it's interesting that the different resources scale differently. So in the beginning, you needed 10 seconds for 1 copper plate, and the same for an iron. The copper, after it was upgraded, it's 2 seconds for 2, so in other words, 1 second per plate. However, iron is still 6 seconds per plate. So each ore kind of requires a different amount of processing, and the less processing it requires, the more valid that using a foundry can be. And if things are really bad, then that might push you towards using stone furnaces. I think a middle ground is to simply put electric or gas furnaces in any setup that has a processing upgrade, and the ones that don't, well, deal with it when you get that upgrade. So let's address our 2 setups. Copper is out in the middle of nowhere and easy to do. Right now it only requires 6 stone furnaces because it's so energy efficient. So putting in the gas furnaces, and I guess we'll select gasoline since that seems to be the most likely thing we'll burn. That we actually only need 1.5 of them, so that's going to be heavily inserter limited. We could do the advanced foundry too. We would only need 6 of them. And as discussed earlier, gas furnaces are really only relevant for a very specific part of our factory's growth, and we're in it now. So eventually everything will be electric, but right now we're going to kind of transition away from things that make ash, but still stay away from electric. So that means we will use these furnaces and consume a little bit of gasoline. And of course, the important thing here is now we want electric miners. And looking at the numbers, it's already based on 2 full belts, and I don't really want to rebuild the setup to run on 3. So this seems fine. So to do this, we're going to need to send our fuel down in the form of a pipe, but also it's an interesting situation where we could potentially scavenge some fuel that we're currently wasting, because right now any syngas that we don't need for plastic is just being vented, and because it's a gas we can't put it in a giant tailings pond. We could just do a ton of tanks next to each other, but that seems kind of derpy to me, so I would rather try to use the fluid. The way the fluids work are kind of weird, but if we grab a tank and let's just use this, it looks like it's for both liquids and gases. That this will be the main buffer tank for our liquid fuels. And really it should be down here because this is where all the pipes are, even though it's kind of busy in here. And then we'll need this smaller one, which will function as a buffer for the syngas. And I don't like how tall this is. It makes it hard to see what's going on. So syngas we still want to vent if we have too much. But if we have at least 10% of it available, so that means that there will be some for plastic, that anything that remains can continue, and it'll go inside this little tank here. It looks like we want the overflow instead, and then this pump will read the contents of that tank. And we'll say if syngas is less than, how about like 1,000, that it's allowed to run. So what this means is that the gasoline will turn off if the syngas basically exists. And you can have two pumps pumping into the same tank. We can put another one here. You can have this where the fluids are just mixed and whatever one gets control will just insert its fluid, but that can leave it to chance. And if you want to actually have logic, you would want to put something in here. So this basically will mean that syngas will always have priority, but if it's low because it's all been used, then the gasoline will take over. And as the syngas fills up, the gasoline pump will turn off and eventually the tank will empty and the syngas can go in. And unfortunately those two symbols are very similar to each other, so it's kind of hard to tell the difference, but it is filled with syngas, and syngas is terrible at 400 kilojoules, but it is fuel, and we're at the point now where we need it, so we might as well use it. Well, one that we could save is this coal belt, because we need it in very small quantities, and it's essentially being used as fuel, if we want to follow it here, for essentially our miners and our copper setup here. So we really only actually need the coal in very small quantities for our science setup, and it does not need to be on a belt like this, which means we can remove it and give the task to a caravan. We know caravans are going to come through here, so we might as well get that started. And is there anything else we would want to deliver by caravan? Yeah, we probably would want to deliver the latex too, because that's needed in very small quantities. And looks like we got some flora there that's spoiled. I wonder how that happened. It just kind of randomly picked that. Okay, well, I don't think we're going to need too much, but let's just do 2 inserters. And one thing you need to be careful of when doing caravans is that these do hold 30 stacks of resources, and that's fine, but what happens if you want to pick it up and move it? Then that could be 3 stacks in every one of these outposts, and also 3 stacks in every physical caravan to remove too. So it can create a lot of junk. So you want to be careful not to create an unnecessary amount of junk. And since we're going to use 1 caravan for both of these stops, then if we limit it to half of its stacks, it should work out. And of course we have it in our inventory as well, so that'll help out. Okay, while we're here, let's see if we can fix this. And it's actually quite simple, that we can just have the right be the automation packs, and the left will be the flora, and it can recombine there. It looks like all of these filled up nicely. That's why our research was so fast, is because we had a buffer. But now everything should find its way. This is a huge belt we're removing. You can see that even with half belts full of resources, your inventory fills up very quickly when you pull them out. We'll worry about all of these miners in a bit. Let's try not to get too sidetracked, because we've got several tasks we're working on right now. I don't like how this positioning is kind of blocking our view here, but... And the moondrops will get their belt back. Technically, we don't really need that many moondrops, and since they're going so far, that could also be something that we can send by caravan, but for now, let's just address immediate things that will help us, and we'll deal with moondrops later if the belt is getting in the way. And we don't need this belt. So put the outpost in, and to maintain the sides, let's do some filters of coal and latex. and off it goes. And one or the other is going to be emptied first, but what matters is the caravan's capacity, not what's in the actual depot. So the depot will function sort of as a buffer. And actually, one other thing you can do with these is limit them with boxes instead. That way, if there's a caravan sitting there and you hit the X, it won't just like completely unload all of its stuff. Right now our factory is super dormant, and you can kind of see that if we expanded the fish turbines, that the steam engines would essentially not even run at all. So believe it or not, the tiny amount of power that we're making from the fish turbines is essentially appropriate for our current factory, despite the fact our total power output is so much higher. So that means that the wind power is only about 5% of our total output, and that's just so we can burn away the byproducts. There's not as many of them now because of the way that the power plants are set up and how they recycle the coal dust, but we are going to find ourselves in a situation where we have new byproducts that we need to burn away. So it's better to prepare for that ahead of time. So this is going to be an incredibly long pipe, but it's no longer than the belt was. Well, we are going to have a lot of stuff to pull out here because we don't need any of this anymore. And we are at the point now where we might want to put these miners in a fairly final position, because we do want to mine this patch out completely, and we can use the caravan depot to get rid of our junk. And minimally we need to have 2 lines of 8 miners, but we may want to do more than that, simply to allow this patch to naturally mine out. We really only care if output speed is an issue, because there's no idle power draw on miners, so there's no disadvantage to just having a giant line of them like this. So let's put 2 complete lines in. We don't need to do all the crazy overlapping stuff we did with coal. This is plenty enough capacity. So yeah, you definitely want to automate miners because we're using a ton of them now. Okay, the miners are good. And then let's pull out the furnace stack. Okay, well, no ash means none of this stupid belt stuff that we can actually combine everything onto one simple belt. So positioning of these does matter a little bit. We're going to need an input of 15. Each furnace is going to be able to support 2 inserters. So that's 2.4, which means we need a total of 7 furnaces. We might want to actually space them and do the normal Factorio thing of having a furnace stack with power poles in the middle. So let's give these a shot. First, we'll take the items we have in our inventory and just throw them in there. You can see they immediately create tons and tons of resources. And yeah, inserter limited here, so they're all just going to flicker on and off. But that is how you run on gas. And right now we're at least making use of that syngas, which we were basically doing nothing with. So that's nice. The other thing we are going to take care of are stone mine here. And we don't really need to worry about how we put these down. We might as well just kind of max out the patch. Of course, it's already kind of maxed out as is. It's not very large. So actually, this will do it. So nice and fast. And our electrical network, well, our factory's relatively idle right now, so we're not really seeing a bunch of mining drills run. But yeah, this is kind of why you need to be careful about doing this, because if your factory's idle and you're upgrading everything, it looks fine, and then you try to do anything and your factory falls to its knees. But this is yet another belt of ash we don't need. So awesome, our factory got just a little bit more efficient. In preparation for upgrading our iron, I switched over all of the miners on the second coal patch to electric, and you can see how much denser it is, and now we have tons of extra space for a great many belts. But we were able to pull out the fuel belt for the iron, and one thing I do to limit how much stuff we have to pick up is I unhook the fuel and just let them go through their fuel. So now when I have to pick these up, at least my inventory isn't going to be filled with a bunch of raw coal. And the setup is kind of clearing itself out, but there's something to consider here. This is our setup as it is now, but it's only running on 25 iron ore. So we could upgrade this to be 30 ore instead with a very minimum upgrade. And we might as well, since we're here. There's so much craziness that we don't need anymore. It's extremely satisfying, for me anyway. I don't know, perhaps as a viewer, if it's as satisfying as it is for me. to remove all of this early Pi shenanigans and replace it with electric miners and splitters. The things that vanilla Factorio basically gives you within the first few minutes of gameplay. It's just after putting up with this stuff for so long, it's just so satisfying to finally move away from all of that. So we need a bunch of miners, and we might as well just do a long straight line of them, just so we don't have to constantly come back here and put more miners in. Additionally, we need one more line of miners to produce the iron that we need for steel. And I believe it is this belt right here. Let's check. Yep, and in pretty good timing, this is about to be cleared out. Not that we're actually going to remove it, but in order to expand production, we're going to need 2 more jaw crushers. Now, one thing to note is that we're going to have slightly more than 2 belts, so we need to do a side switch. Okay, let's see if it works. Yeah, power spiking. As we would expect, the electric mining drills are now going to be our factory's biggest energy consumer. And this will change over time as we get more efficient ore processing. That we'll be spending less electricity actually mining the ore and more processing it into better forms. And in the end, that will save us electricity and power. Okay, then we need our 9 furnaces. And it's basically going to look like this. And it'll probably be easier just to put 10 of them in here. Because of the energy that goes into making the iron, we actually need the increased speed of these furnaces. We have so many spare mechanical inserters now because of all of these builds being replaced. Kind of shows you just how many inserters were required for all of that ash. And at some point, we're going to see it cycling on and off with syngas, and I would like to actually visually make sure that it works. And we probably will be able to see that in a second because of the energy consumption of these. It's actually quite fast. Okay then, let us consume an incredible amount of fuel doing this. It's actually not that bad compared to glass, but that is very fast processing. And yep, that's what I was expecting to see, that the gasoline in the pipe is going down. The next section of pipe has the syngas in it, and they can't mix within the same pipe section, but they can exist on the same network. It's just the gasoline has to be consumed first, and then the syngas will push its way through. Well, since we're here, we might as well do some more research. And there's a couple directions we could go, but it makes the most sense to just continue making all of our various ore processing more efficient and replacing all of the miners with electric ones. So let's go down the list here. We can do quartz processing. They don't use furnaces, but nonetheless, it still saves fuel. We have the first step of crushing the quartz, and we get some stone, and then that crushed quartz is melted down into glass. We can do lead processing, and the lead ore simply goes through an automated screener to make grade 1, and that is smelted into plates. And the nickel ore goes through a jaw crusher. We get some stone and some grade 1 nickel, and then that nickel is smelted. And tin is a 2-step similar to copper, where the tin ore goes in and you get grade 1 and grade 2, and then any grade 2 we find needs to be crushed into grade 1, and then the grade 1 turns into the tin plates. So we'll go with that for now. But we didn't actually pick the TURD here for the creature chamber. And it's kind of a weird one. I mean, the creature chamber isn't that important of a building, for production reasons anyway. As a reminder, the creature chamber is the thing that basically 3D prints out creatures from nothing. So it's kind of an interesting building to actually receive an upgrade. But actually, let's just watch this gasoline real quick since it is depleting rapidly. And I'm sure we're going to find electricity use spiking, and certainly the electric mining drills are up at the top now. So as the gasoline runs out, it's replaced with syngas. And the syngas is in the pipes, however, the furnaces still have their gasoline because that's technically a separate network. And when it runs out, the syngas comes in and much higher consumption because it's a much worse fuel. And now we should see the level in the tank go down really fast. And in fact, it has. It's basically at 0. So actually, we should be able to see this work. So the level in the buffer tank is rapidly decreasing, and it needs to get to below 1000 to see if this pump turns on. So let's see it. All right. that went below 1000. However, the level doesn't actually get replaced in here until it completely empties. But it seems like it's working so far. Every time we do a run of refined concrete, we have more and more in the chest because we get 2 refined concrete for every 1 regular concrete we pick up. So it's kind of funny seeing the production rate gradually increase. Okay, the tank's almost empty. There it goes. It's a little glitchy, but it does work. And now we'll be going through the gasoline. And then the syngas tank now has more than 1000. So the gasoline pump turns off and the syngas in the pipes is quickly consumed and it switches over. So yes, the creature chamber upgrade. We have knowledge transfer here that will make the building consume 3 times as much power and slow down by 10%. However, that changes the recipe for essentially every single creature that it can print. And it will either dramatically reduce the number of DNA samples that are needed. And as a reminder, the DNA samples are the items that are made by this dish thing. So this first recipe for crawdads reduces it from 20 to 2. So it is a huge savings. And the other way that it might work with the Corlexes, for example, is that you still have to put the same amount in, but you have a high % chance of getting them back at the end. So it's one of those two. This doesn't seem all that good to me because it's really not that difficult to just make them. Certainly you do have to put biosamples in and science packs, but ultimately it just doesn't seem that hard and worth upgrading. That you're essentially upgrading the data array, not the creature chamber, by picking that. I mean, that's fine if that's what you want to do, but it just seems a little weak to me. Then we have neural fusion. It makes the machine 10 times faster with 10 times the energy consumption. So in other words, it's just faster. And you have the Arthurian Codex, and now the creature chamber will require it to be built. So basically it just makes it 10 times faster, and that depends on how fast you want to make critters. Again, I don't feel like you need to make that many of them through the creature chamber for that to be worthwhile, but there are certain creatures I can see that it would help, but it just seems like a scale thing to me that just make it bigger. Like, it's not like this makes it more efficient, it just makes it faster. So if you just had 10 creature chambers, it would essentially be identical to this. And then the final one, planetary adaptation. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a really good one, but I would say it's probably the only good one that's in here. That it basically changes each creature to be better. And speed and health are increased by 35%. So we have a lot of creatures here that aren't relevant yet. But for example, with the caravan, the original one is 30.2 kilometers an hour, and then the upgraded one is 40.8. It doesn't make it any more expensive. It's just faster now, and that's a 35% increase to the speed of all of our caravans, and that seems really good. So we'll pick it, and it does unlock a recipe for you to switch your non-upgraded version to the upgraded one. And if you look at the icon, the non-upgraded one has the white paw, and the upgraded one has that faintly yellow paw. So you can upgrade them, but note the warning that it will delete all the metadata. So in other words, it basically will delete the creature, its inventory, and also any pathing that you've made for it. So it's not as simple as pick the creature up and change it. But for ones that don't have any metadata like these ones, we can just come in there and now we're good. Oh wow, nice. And that's a lot of jerky already. So now, to upgrade the metadata, we basically need to put our new creature down. And I don't think it's visually any different. But we can right-click and copy the information on there. That will make its schedule the same, but its cargo is still empty. And what's interesting is you can actually pick up caravans, and their cargo will stay inside the caravan. So you see the tooltip here. Not only does it have a name, but it tells you all of the stuff that's inside. So if we don't want to lose all of that, we need to manually move this around. And there we go. Now it's doing the same thing, and this other one has nothing in there, so we can pick it up and then upgrade it. So depending on how many creatures you have at this point, it could get obnoxious upgrading them all. But luckily, we just have the 3 of them, so it's pretty straightforward. Give it the schedule, remove the old one. And you can hover over it if you're not sure if you got everything, but we did. And then replace it. And the last one, and how is this working? Yeah, I was worried about the gravel. And yep, this is basically completely full because the gravel production rate is really slow. I think we just need to use a separate creature for the gravel. And send that one on its way. In it goes, and this is going to produce it incredibly slow. I have no idea how long this is going to have to run before the caravan even makes one trip. But at least it's really easy. It's just fill cargo and empty cargo. And well, this tank is low enough to where we can't see the level anymore, so we'll reverse the pump, clear out the line, and we need to run something else. Aromatics really needs to get run because it's very full, but we're actually using it for some things. So instead, I think I'd rather empty out the condensates tank. It's produced in very large quantities. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are going to continue to use gas furnaces and improve our material efficiency with our better ore processing methods. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.